Okay, example 1. We are told to factor each trinomial. So when I said that our first leading coefficient isn't 1 anymore, I was telling the truth. I have this 3x cubed, so our leading coefficient is actually 3 here. Our first step is always to look for a GCF. This is always going to be number 1. Remember that a GCF is referred to as a greatest common factor. Now you can go back and you can do this, the 3x cubed is equal to 1 times 3 times x times x times x. You can do that if it's not obvious to what the GCF is. You do this enough times and you start to figure out what the greatest common factor is. So if you need to do this, there is no shame in your game. Please do that if you are still figuring out what the greatest common factor is. I'm going to take it a step further for those of us who are ready to advance. And I can see that my leading coefficient is 3. I know that 15 is divisible by 3, and so is 18. 18 is also divisible by 3. So that means my GCF is going to have a 3 in it. I also know that there's 3 x's in this 3x cubed. There's 2 x's in the 15x squared, and there's 1 x in the negative 18x. So that means they all have at least 1 x in common. Not more than that, because this 18x only has 1 x. So my 3x is my GCF. Now, when I factor that out, because I need to do that, I'm going to keep my GCF out in front. So I'm going to have 3x and then parentheses, and then I'm going to divide everything. So if you did the circles, you're going to keep doing the same way that you were doing before. But if you're advancing with me, I know that 3 divided by 3 is 1. And if I take an x out of x cubed, I'm left with x squared. Plus 15 divided by 3 is 5. Take an x away from x squared, and I have x. Then negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. Take an x away from x, and I'm left with no more x's anymore. Okay, so now I'm going to use my butterfly method with what's in blue. So I'm going to list my A, which is 1, and my B, which is 5, and my C, which is negative 6. And I'm going to plug into my butterfly now. So I have 1x on either side. I have 1 times negative 6 on the top, and I have 5 on the bottom. And 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. And I'm going to come over here and list factors. But before I do, let's talk about whether or not I'm going to look for a sum or a difference. I see that C is negative, and since C is negative, I'm going to be looking for a difference. And that means my signs are going to be different. I'm going to have 1 positive and 1 negative. So when I come over to this negative 6, excuse me, and I'm listing factors, I'm going to have negative 1 and positive 6, positive 1 and negative 6, and then let's see, 2 and negative 3, or negative 2 and positive 3. And those are all my factors of 6 with different signs. So let's see, which one of those subtracts to be positive 5? Well, the 2 and the negative 3, those don't give us 5. Because if we subtract those, negative 2 plus positive 3 gives me positive 1, so that doesn't work. Negative 2 minus 3 gives me negative 1, so that doesn't work. 1 minus 6 gives me negative 5, so we don't want negative 5, we want positive 5. So that doesn't work. So that leaves me with negative 1 and 6. So I'll just put negative 1 here, and I'll put 6 here. Okay, so then those are my factors. Now, how do I write my answer? Well, I'm going to write it as x minus 1, or 1x minus 1 is fine, and then x plus 6. Now, that is not fully complete because I cannot forget my GCF. My GCF was 3x. I'm going to come back down here, and I'm going to write that in front, and all together there is my answer.